Before time began, God existed. He created the heavens and the earth. The earth had no shape, was totally empty, and covered in darkness. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good. God divided the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening, and then there was morning, and so the first day was created. On the second day, God spoke and created the sky by separating the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth. On the third day, God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together, and let the dry land appear." God called the dry land earth, and the waters the seas. God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth be vibrant with green grass and filled with colorful plants and plentiful fruit trees." He saw all that he created, and it was good. On the fourth day, God said, "Let there be lights to shine and divide the day from the night." And so it happened. God made the sun to rule the day, and the moon to rule the night. God also made the twinkling stars and planets, and placed them in the sky. God saw that all he created was good. Then on the fifth day, God said, "The waters will be filled with living fish and sea creatures of all kinds. Let there be birds to soar above the earth and the open skies." So God created every fish to swim in the sea and every bird to fly in the air. God liked all that he saw and said, "Be fruitful, fill the waters of the seas and skies of the earth." On the sixth day, God said, "Let the earth produce every sort and size of wild animal, livestock, crawling bug, and creeping reptile." And it was so. God made every imaginable animal and creature on the earth, and God saw that it was good. Then God made one last new creature from the dirt of the ground, people. God called this creature man, and he was created in God's own image. Then God breathed life into the man, and he lived. The first man was named Adam. God told Adam, "Look, everything on the earth is yours." On the seventh day, God was finished creating all the earth, the heavens and everything in it. So God made the seventh day special, a day to rest. God placed Adam in a splendid garden called Eden. There was plenty of food to eat there and peaceful animals all around. A winding river flowed through the garden to water the plants and the animals. God told Adam, "You will take care of this garden. It is filled with good food for you to eat. But you must never eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If you eat the fruit of this tree, you will surely die." Then God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. He needs a companion." So God brought the animals to the man to be named. Adam chose a name for each wild animal and bird of the sky, but none were just the right companion for Adam. So God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. As Adam slept, God took one of his ribs and created a woman from that. Then God brought the woman to Adam, and her name was Eve. Adam saw that she was very beautiful and the perfect companion for him. He said, "She is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She will be called woman, because she was taken out of man." This is why a man leaves his father and his mother and will join with his wife, and they will become one flesh. Adam and Eve lived happily in the Garden of Eden. They had no clothes on, but they were not embarrassed or ashamed, for they were wondrously made by God's hand. Adam and Eve lived with all the wild animals in the garden, but they were not afraid of them because God created them all to live together in peace and harmony. For all that God created was good.
God created all the earth and the creatures within it to be good and live together in perfect peace and harmony. Adam and Eve lived happily tending to the Garden of Eden and all the animals in it. Now the serpent was more cunning and clever than any animal of the field which God had made. He wanted to trick the woman. So one day he said to Eve, "Has God really said, 'You shall not eat of any tree of the garden'?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees of the garden, but not the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden. God has said, 'You shall not eat of it. You shall not touch it, or you will die.'" The lying serpent replied to the woman, "You won't really die, for God knows that in the day you eat the fruit, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that the fruit looked delicious to eat, and that the tree could make her wise, she really wanted to taste it. So Eve was tempted and took some of the fruit and ate it. In the book of James, chapter 1, verses 14 through 15 tells us, "We're tempted when we're drawn away from God and His will by our own desires and enticed. When we act upon those desires that are against God's will, it's sin, which brings death." Eve was drawn away from God and toward the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden by her own desire to taste it. The sly serpent noticed that Eve desired to eat the fruit, so he came to entice and trick her. He wanted Eve to disobey God and eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So he did anything possible to try to get her to eat the forbidden fruit. His lies worked, and Eve took some of the fruit and ate it. The very moment she bit into the fruit, Eve committed a sin. She disobeyed God and gave into temptation. Then she gave some to her husband, Adam, who was with her, and he ate it too. Immediately, their eyes were opened, and they felt shame for the first time because they both knew that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Later, when they heard God's voice as He was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, the man and his wife hid themselves among the trees of the garden. God called to Adam and said to him,
"Where are you?"
The man replied, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself." God said,
"Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?"
Adam said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit from the tree, and I ate it." God then said to Eve,
"What have you done?"
The woman cried, "The serpent deceived me. He told me I would not die, so I ate it. He lied to me." Adam and Eve were tricked that day by the enemy. They both sinned by giving in to their temptation. God created Adam and Eve to be perfect, but He didn't control their actions. In other words, they had a free will, just as we do. And they had wants and desires just like us. However, their desire to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a wrong desire. And when they acted upon their wrong desire, it was a sin. You see, if our desires pull us away from God and His will for our lives, then they are wrong desires. And if we act upon them, it's a sin. Therefore, we always have to be careful, because the enemy is going to entice us to act on our wrong desires, knowing that when we do, it's a sin. Adam and Eve were deceived by the wicked serpent on the day they ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They both sinned by giving in to their temptation. God created everything and everyone in the garden to be perfect and without sin. But when Adam and Eve chose to sin, they were separated from God, because that's what sin does. It separates us from God. God was heartbroken when they sinned because He knew what would happen as a result of their sin. Because of Adam and Eve's sin, all of God's creation was affected. Instead of being perfect and blessed, it became the opposite of God's desire. It became cursed. After Adam and Eve sinned, God told the lying serpent, "Because you have allowed Satan to use you to deceive Adam and Eve, you are more cursed than anything, more than all animals. You will crawl on your belly and eat the dry dust all the days of your life." Then God said to Eve, "Because you disobeyed, you will have terrible pain during childbirth. You will want to please your husband, but he will rule over you, causing problems in your marriage." God then said to Adam, "Because you chose to listen to your wife and ate the fruit I commanded you not to eat, the ground is cursed. It will grow sharp thorns, and you will have to work extra hard to have food to eat all the days of your life. You were created from the dust of the ground, and you will return to the dust when you die." Adam called his wife Eve because she would be the mother of all the living. And God chose certain animals and showed Adam and Eve how to offer them as a sacrifice for their sin. He made clothes out of the animal skins for Adam and Eve to cover their nakedness. God then banished Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden to farm the ground, the same dirt they'd been made from. After sending them out of the garden, God placed angels and a flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life. From then on, man was not allowed to return to the Garden of Eden, and all of creation was cursed. The world God created was no longer perfect because of sin, but God promised to send a Savior, born of a virgin, who would save us from our sin. Adam and Eve were married in the Garden of Eden. After they sinned, they had to leave the garden. They also began sacrificing animals as an atonement for their sin, as God had taught them. Atonement means that God accepts the death of the sacrificial animal as punishment for our sin. You see, God is just, and being just, God required that sin be punished, and the punishment for sin is death. However, God is also merciful, and He allowed man to offer animals as a sacrificial offering in their place. But when Jesus came, He paid the ultimate sacrifice, and since then, no more animal sacrifices are needed. Once Adam and Eve were settled outside of the garden, Eve gave birth to a son, Cain. She was overjoyed and said, "I have delivered a son with God's help." Later, she gave birth to his brother, Abel. When both boys were old enough, they helped their parents take care of their household. Abel took care of sheep, and Cain was a farmer. As time passed, Cain brought an offering to God from the fruits and vegetables of his garden. Abel also brought a sacrifice, the best firstborn lamb of his flock. God was pleased with Abel and his offering, but He didn't approve of Cain's offering because it was not a true sacrifice. No animal was sacrificed as an atonement for his soul. Cain became very angry, and his face was obviously upset. God asked Cain, "Why are you angry? Why do you look so upset? If you obey, you will be accepted. If you don't obey, sin is out to get you. It's always ready to devour you like a hungry lion. You must be on your guard at all times." A little while later, Cain was still mad and even became jealous of Abel because his offering was accepted by God. So he said to Abel, "Let's go into the field." While they were in the field, Cain let his anger take control of him, and he attacked Abel and killed him. Cain ignored God's words and allowed sin to control him. Shortly after this, God spoke to Cain again and asked, "Where is Abel, your brother?" Cain was still angry, and he said, "I don't know. Why should I keep track of my brother?" Then God said to him, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. From now on, you are cursed. No longer will the land you farm produce good fruits and grains for you to eat. You will be a homeless wanderer on the earth." So Cain left God's presence and went to live in the land of Nod, east of the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve continued to make sacrifices to God for their sin. Then they had another son and named him Seth. Then men and women began to pray and worship the name of God. Years after Adam and Eve's sin of disobedience, there were many people living on the earth God created, and they had become very wicked. They chose to disobey God and do very bad things all the time. They were out of control, and the earth was full of evil and violence. God's heart was broken by their evil actions. But one man was different. Noah was a good and righteous man compared to the other people at that time. God said to Noah, "The earth is filled with too much evil and violence because of man's wicked heart. I am going to destroy all my creation, man, animals, insects, and birds of the sky, because I am sorry that I have made them. I want you to build an ark, a ship made of wood, with many rooms inside. Seal the ark, inside and out, with tar, and put a roof on top so that it will be waterproof. I'm going to bring a flood on the earth, and it will destroy everything that is alive." Then God said to Noah, "But I will make my covenant with you. You will go into the ark with your family. You will bring 2 of every living creature, male and female, on the ark to keep them alive with you. Get as much food as you will need for your family and the animals and store it inside." So Noah did all that God commanded. When everything was ready, God said to Noah, "Get into the ark with your family. You alone are righteous, so only you and your family will be saved. In 7 days I will cause it to rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will destroy every living thing that I have created." Noah was 600 years old when the flood came on the earth. It didn't stop raining for 40 days and nights. The flood covered the whole earth for 150 days, and every living creature on the earth was destroyed, including man, animals, insects, and birds of the sky. But God kept his promise to Noah. Noah and those with him on the ark survived because Noah chose to obey God. After 150 days, God made a strong wind pass over all the earth. The rain stopped, and the floodwaters began to go down. Several weeks later, Noah opened a window on the ark and released a beautiful white bird called a dove to see if there was dry land anywhere on the earth. The dove returned to Noah with a freshly plucked olive leaf. This was a sign to Noah that there was dry ground on the earth and plants were starting to grow again. Then God said to Noah, "Go out of the ark with your family. Release every living creature that I told you to bring with you, so that they may multiply and fill the earth with my good creations once more." So Noah, his family, and all the animals, insects, and birds left the ark. Noah then built an altar and offered sacrifices to God. He did this just as God had instructed Adam and Eve to do many years before, when they disobeyed God and had to leave the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve had to sacrifice animals as an atonement for their sin. Atonement means that God accepts the death of a sacrificial animal as punishment for our sin. God is just, so sin must be punished, and the punishment for sin is death. God is also merciful, so he allowed man to offer animals as a sacrificial offering in his place. But when Jesus came, he paid the ultimate sacrifice, and since then, no more animal sacrifices are needed. God was pleased with Noah's offerings, and he made a promise to Noah and all future generations that there would never be another flood to destroy the earth and every living creature. God said, "I will place a rainbow in the clouds as a sign of my promise to you and every living creature." When we see a rainbow today, we remember God's promise to Noah. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and everyone on this earth is their descendant. Noah lived 950 years before he died. After the flood, the only people on the earth were Noah, his wife, and his sons and their wives. Noah's sons and their wives had children, and their families grew so that after a while there were many people on the earth again. They were all the same family, and because of this, they all spoke the same language. Nearly 100 years after the flood, one of Noah's great-grandsons, a man named Nimrod, decided to rebel against God's commands. He was a very strong and evil warrior. All the people migrated to settle in a lush country called Babylon. Nimrod was their leader because he was a strong warrior, and he convinced his friends to follow him. They said to each other, "We don't need God to rule over us or the rules that Noah taught us to obey." So they all chose to disobey God. They said, "Let us make bricks to build a city and a tower that reaches the sky. Then we can worship whichever gods we want." Once again, God saw that his people were not following his instructions, but instead were disobeying him. God said, "My people all speak the same language and are working together to do the wrong thing. This is only the beginning of what they will do together to disobey my commands." So God caused them to speak different languages so they could not understand each other's words anymore. This caused great chaos and confusion. Because they couldn't understand each other anymore, they had to stop building the city and the tall tower. The tower was called the Tower of Babel because this is where God confused their language. After that, the people scattered all over the earth. All the people on the earth come from Noah. It doesn't matter what color our skin is, what language we speak, or where we live. We all come from Noah because his family was the only family that survived the flood. Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 and 10 tells us, "One day we will all worship together in heaven." It says, "After this I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hands. And they were shouting with a great roar, 'Salvation comes from our God, who sits on the throne and from the Lamb.'" God wants us to love and respect each other because we all come from Noah. Many years after the Tower of Babel, there was a man named Abram who put all his faith and trust in God. He was a descendant of Shem, one of Noah's sons. Abram was chosen by God for a very important purpose, and he would always be remembered for his great faith. God commands all of us to use the special gifts and abilities He has given us to help others know and follow Jesus. God promises favor on earth and rewards in heaven to all those who obey Him. God said to Abram,
Leave your country, your relatives, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. Because you choose to obey me, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and you will be famous. You will be a blessing and have favor on earth. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse anyone who treats you badly. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed.
Although these promises were a covenant or agreement between God and Abram. So Abram left his home as God told him. Abram took Sarai his wife, his nephew Lot, and all their belongings, and they traveled to the land of Canaan. Abram was already 75 years old when they started the journey to Canaan. Once they arrived, God appeared to Abram and told him,
I will give this land to your children.
Abram decided to build an altar to God there and was amazed that God promised this land to his children, even though Abram and Sarai were very old and didn't have any children. Abram then continued to travel with Sarai and Lot. While Abram tried to follow all God's commands, he disobeyed by choosing to take his nephew Lot with him. God told Abram to leave his relatives behind because he knew the problems it would eventually create. As time went on, Abram and Lot's animals and possessions became very large, and there was not enough land and water for both families. So Abram said to Lot, Let's not fight between us. We are family. Isn't there plenty of land all around us? Let's separate our family so there is enough land and water for each of us. Abram allowed Lot to decide which part of the land he wanted. Lot chose a beautiful land called the Jordan Valley, and Abram and his family settled in the land of Canaan. After Lot moved away, God said to Abram,
Now look all around you in every direction. All the land that you can see is for you and your children forever. I will make your descendants so numerous that they will be like the dust covering the earth.
God chose Abram for a special purpose, a very important part of his plan. God knew that Abram loved him with all his heart, and that he would teach and train his children to love and obey him too. God chose Abram to be the father of his chosen people, the Israelites. Today, we call this race of people the Jews. God also promised that the Messiah, the Savior of all the people in the world, would come from Abram's descendants. This Messiah was Jesus, and through him, every single promise from God would be fulfilled. Now Abram and Sarai had lived many years in the land of Canaan. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the Almighty God. I will make my covenant between me and you will become the father of many nations. You will no longer be called Abram. Your name will now be called Abraham, and your wife Sarai will now be called Sarah. As God was speaking to Abraham, he fell face down onto the ground. God told Abraham, You will have many descendants after you. Your family will increase in number, and kings will come from your family line. This covenant between us will last forever. This is my promise to you. Abraham never forgot what God had promised him many years before. At that time, the Lord came to Abram in a vision and said, Fear not, Abram, I am your shield and great reward. Then God brought Abram out of his tent and pointed at the night sky filled with stars and said, Now look to the heavens and count the stars. If you are able to count them, so your children will be. Abram had faith and believed that God would one day fulfill that promise. Then God told Abraham, As for your wife Sarah, I will bless her, and I will give you a son by her.
When Abraham heard this, he was so surprised that he laughed and asked God, "Will a man who is 100 years old and a woman who is 90 have a child?" But God answered Abraham, "Your wife Sarah will have a son, and you will call him Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him and all his family, and my covenant will never end. I will return to you about this time next year, and by then your wife Sarah will have a son." Abraham's wife Sarah just happened to be listening behind the door of the tent, and she began laughing at the thought of having a baby in her old age, and said, "Will I really have a child when Abraham and I are so old?" Then God said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is there anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you next year, and you will have a son." This scared Sarah very much, so she replied, "I did not laugh." But God answered and said, "Yes, Sarah, you did laugh. The following year, just as God had promised to Abraham and Sarah, they had a son, and they named him Isaac. By the faith of Abraham and Sarah, they received from God the gift of a son, Isaac. And even though they were very old, from their son Isaac came many descendants, as many as the stars in heaven and grains of sand by the seashore. Abraham and his wife Sarah had been called by God to leave their own country and go settle in the land of Canaan. Abraham's nephew, Lot, and his family followed them to Canaan as well. Their flocks and herds of animals grew so large that they had to separate and live in different regions of the land. Lot and his family moved to the region of Sodom, which was also near the city of Gomorrah. Both cities were filled with very evil and wicked men who did not honor the word of God. One day, Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. Abraham bowed down as he realized that it was the Lord and 2 angels that had come to visit him. Abraham said, "Lord, please allow me to bring you fresh water and feed you from my animals." The Lord agreed and sat down to eat and drink with Abraham. As soon as the visitors were finished with the meal, they all rose to leave. The Lord turned to Abraham and said, "I have heard many evil and wicked things about the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. I am here to see if their sins are as great as I have been told." The 2 angels began walking toward the cities, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham asked the Lord, "Lord, are you going to destroy the righteous people along with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people within the city? Will you please spare the city for the 50? The Lord answered, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city, then I will not destroy it." Then Abraham asked, "My Lord, what if 45 righteous people can be found? Would you please spare the city then?" Again the Lord answered, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 of my righteous people in the city." Abraham continued to ask God's favor over the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah until he got down to 10 righteous people. At last Abraham said, "Lord, please do not be angry with me, but what if just 10 righteous people are found? Would you spare the city then?" In God's great mercy, he answered, "Even if there are just 10 righteous people in the city, I will not destroy it."
When the Lord finished speaking to Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned to his tent. By now the two angels had arrived at the city of Sodom. Abraham's nephew, Lot, was sitting at the gate of the city. He immediately bowed to them and begged them to come and stay at his house for the night, where he could feed them and they could safely stay the night in the wicked and evil city. Just as they were all getting ready to go to bed, people from all over Sodom came to Lot's house and called out to Lot from outside and said,
"Bring your visitors outside to us."
Lot refused because he knew of their wickedness and went outside to plead with them to leave his visitors alone. The people of Sodom became so angry, they tried to grab Lot and break down his door. But the angels of the Lord reached out and grabbed Lot and pulled him back into the house to safety. The angels struck the men of Sodom with blindness, and they could no longer find the door. When morning came, the two angels told Lot to take his wife and 2 daughters and escape out of the city. When Lot hesitated, they grabbed the hands of Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters and brought them outside the city. The angels told Lot, "Take your wife and 2 daughters and run as quickly as you can to the mountains, where you will be safe, and do not look behind you." As Lot and his family were fleeing for their lives, his wife looked behind her and was turned into a pillar of salt. God rained down burning sulfur and fire from heaven and completely burned up the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and all the surrounding land filled with plants and animals. Early the next morning, as Abraham looked down upon the burned and ruined cities below, he knew God remembered his righteousness and the righteousness of Lot and his family and delivered them all to safety. Abraham was 100 and his wife Sarah was 90 when, just as God had promised, they had a son and named him Isaac. Isaac was their only child, and they loved him with all their hearts. As Isaac grew into a young boy, Abraham taught Isaac to love God and to follow all the commands that God put before them. One day, God spoke to Abraham.
"Abraham."
Very quickly, Abraham replied, "Here I am, Lord." Then God said,
"I want you to take your son, Isaac, your only son that you love so much, and go to a mountain in the region of Moriah, and place him on an altar and sacrifice him."
Now this grieved and saddened the heart of Abraham because he loved his only son, Isaac, so much. The next morning, with a heavy heart, Abraham saddled his donkey. He gathered enough wood for the burnt offering, and then he took Isaac and 2 of his young men that worked with him, and they began the journey to the region of Moriah. They had traveled 3 days when Abraham looked up and saw a mountain in the distance. He told the young men, "Stay here while Isaac and I go to the mountain to worship." Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering upon Isaac, picked up a stick of fire and his knife, and began to travel toward the mountain. As they were traveling, Isaac said, "Father?" Abraham said, "Yes, my son." Isaac said, "We have fire and wood for a burnt offering, but we don't have a lamb." Abraham answered, "My son, God himself will provide a lamb for the burnt offering." So they continued to the mountain together. Soon they reached the place that God had told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac as a burnt offering. He tied up Isaac's arms and gently laid him on an altar where he had placed the wood. Then he took the knife and prepared to kill his son, Isaac. Suddenly, Abraham heard an angel of the Lord call out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" And Abraham replied, "Here I am, Lord." And the angel said,
"Do not lay a hand upon the son that you love so much. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God and will obey all that I ask of you. You have proven that you will not withhold your only son that you love."
Just then Abraham looked up, and there, tangled in the branches of a bush, was a ram caught by his horns. He knew then that God had provided this ram as a sacrifice instead of his beloved son, Isaac. Then the angel of the Lord said a second time,
"Abraham, the Lord declares, because you have obeyed all that I ask and have not withheld your only son, whom you love, I will multiply all your descendants as many as the stars in the sky and the sand of the seashores. All nations on earth will be blessed through your descendants, because you have obeyed me."